Life is a perpetual cycle of suffering and wanting, people's dreams aching to be realized, peppered with a sprinkle of hope to help fortify against the knowledge of the inevitability of death. No matter how much one wishes to fight against it, the end result will always be death. Though people struggle to understand the concept of their own demise, humans are forever foolish, searching for a means to extend the breath of life that resides within their brittle bone cages. This cycle of life and death, and the journey to come to terms with it, is the theme of today's game, Eternal Sonata, which takes a rather different approach to storytelling compared to its contemporaries. First released for the Xbox 360 exclusively in 2007, it later received a port, with some updates, to the Sony PlayStation 3 between 2008 and 2009 across all territories. The product of Tri-Crescendo, and published by Bandai Namco, Eternal Sonata promises a unique story and aesthetic that is bound to warm your soul, pull the heartstrings, and make you question your own motivations for life. For the purposes of this review, I played the PS3 version. Unconventionally, Eternal Sonata places us in the shoes of Frederic Francois Chopin, the famous Polish composer who died of tuberculosis in 1849 at the age of 39. Whilst the game sometimes shows the last couple of hours before his death, majority of the adventure takes place within a dream he is having, where he has envisioned a mystical world full of musical motifs and projections of elements of his life. Whilst the game draws narrative motivation from Chopin's life, and has vignettes of historical retellings to stop-end each chapter, he is not truly the protagonist of the game, or the orchestrator of the world. Initially, we are introduced to a 14-year-old girl named Polka, who seems obsessed with throwing herself off a cliff. You see, Polka can use magic. In this world, those who use magic will soon perish, and there is a stigma around the possibility of contagion of this condition, which parallels the AIDS epidemic of the 80s. Whilst Polka is a girl brimming with the possibilities of life, her ability to use magic means that she is globally shunned, which has caused her to become cloistered and ostracized by those outside of her small village. Her adventure begins when she discovers in the nearby town of Ritardando that the floral powder that her village sells is now priced out by the only item not to be heavily taxed by the governing city of Forte, mineral powder. She decides to take it up on herself to head to Forte and beseech the Count to lower taxes to prevent the suffering that the levies are causing. Parallel to this story is that of Allegretto and Beat, two children who have taken it upon themselves to provide for the orphans of Ritardando by stealing food that they need to survive. They too have noticed that everything but mineral powder is being heavily taxed, and decide to do something about it before it causes any more suffering to the orphan children that society have shunned. I liked the theme of magic being something that was feared as a disease, and those that have it are shunned. However, this was only really explored at the beginning of the game when Polka attempts to heal an injured man. After she leaves Ritardando, no one, including the numerous party members that join the adventure, seem all that fazed by her use of magic, despite the general consensus on it by the rest of the world. Not to mention that it's learned that consuming mineral powder, whilst having the benefit of curing anything, will also cause the user's body to eventually degenerate, with the side effect of granting the use of magic. I wonder why no one thought to question Polka on whether she may have started a bad habit early, instead of naturally assuming that her talents are innate. One thing that I will note is that sometimes the themes of the game seem cliched or brushed over, like Polka's magic use, or the general population's willingness to turn a blind eye to the suffering of children. However, when these events are put together with the vignettes detailing the tumultuous times that Chopin himself lived in, the narrative begins to make sense as an allegory of true historical events. Chopin's sister, Emilia, died at the age of 14. Children were displaced in Poland around the time of civil unrest and the instatement of martial law in 1981. If we place fantasy alongside reality, then rather than a frivolous, sometimes nonsensical journey, we get a deep and thoughtful interpretation of the issues that Chopin faced in his short 39 years. And whilst the eternal argument persists that games are not and should not be political, Eternal Sonata, without a doubt, dispels that misconception and proves that they in fact very well can and should. The final thing I want to mention about the characters themselves is that they actually interact with each other at various points throughout the story. Some games I've found tend to have a big cast, but then neglect one or two of the characters later on. Eternal Sonata grants all characters a chance to shine and interact with each other, which I really enjoyed. Of particular note were the scenes between Beat and Salsa, which always got a chuckle out of me. Although to balance out the positive note, I did think that sometimes characters talked for a bit too long especially when they were monologuing. You could definitely pull a bag of popcorn out whenever a cutscene commenced. When exploring the world, most of the locations are linear in nature, which makes backtracking very difficult if not impossible, but I didn't mind this too much. Sometimes along the way off the beaten path you can find treasure chests that impart useful items that will assist you on your journey. The world is filled with hostile creatures which appear on the field. Coming into contact with any of these creatures will initiate a battle, however you must be careful that they don't approach you from the rear, otherwise they will get the first attack in battle. Whilst this is manageable in early parts of the game, at later stages if this happens, you can almost guarantee that your party is going to take a beating. If you manage to take the enemy unawares however, your party will generally get to attack first, so it's best to take advantage of this function where you can. The battle system is where Eternal Sonata really shines and stands apart from other titles that came out around the same time or even since. In order to really explain everything efficiently, I should start by mentioning the party levels. Party level denotes everything in combat, from how much time you have to think about what you are going to do, to how many special attacks you are able to equip. Lower party levels favour giving you more time to consider how you want to approach battle, with the payoff being that more damaging combos and higher item carrying capacity limits are not possible. Party level rises progressively as you reach certain points in the game, which organically makes the game more difficult whilst also granting you additional options to tackle your foes. The other major notable feature of the battle system is the light and dark mechanic. I really loved this as it forced me to strategize where to stand whenever I attacked the enemy. Throughout each of the battlefields there are natural sources of light and darkness, and where someone stands determines which special ability they can use, a light affiliated one or a dark affiliated one. At the beginning of the game a character can only equip one of each ability, but at later party levels they can equip up to 2 of each. Abilities cost no MP to cast, so you can endlessly use a healing spell for example, if you manage to have the character standing in the correct position to do so. This isn't always easy, as some battlefields have moving shadows from clouds overhead, and even the shadow of an enemy or an ally can affect your affiliation. The battles themselves are turn-based, but when your character gets a turn you have a set limit of time to move and attack the enemies, similar to an action battle system. When the enemy attacks your character from the front you have the chance to block it and reduce the damage, and at later party levels you can even counter-attack. I cannot stress enough how important it is to master blocking in this game. Whilst at first it may seem like it's not necessary, some of the later battles, and especially bosses, will destroy a player that doesn't master this technique. I found that counterattacks were more difficult to time correctly because it's a different button altogether, but blocking really saved my skin a number of times. It's also to be noted that if you attack an enemy from the front, they may block your attack, so try to attack from the rear at every opportunity you get. Each character uses a different weapon in battle and also play differently, so it's worth testing them all out to find out which ones work the best for you. For example, Jazz is slow but his sword has a long range and he can do a lot of damage even if his combos are at 3 at a time. Whereas Falsetto is fast, usually gets the first turn, and has a higher attack combo at the cost of damage. My favourite character would have to be Viola without a doubt. Whilst her melee attacks aren't anything to write home about, when she uses her bow from a distance and you aim at the enemy's head, it's easy to stack up huge damage, sometimes even more than what a special attack would do. Characters that are not in the active party do gain levels, but at a lower rate. I found that I tended to enjoy switching out the various characters throughout the journey to keep the adventure fresh and exciting. Outside of battling and the general story, you may sometimes come across score pieces. These are pieces of music that can be played in a duet with certain NPCs. If the piece you choose matches with theirs, you get cheered and receive an item. If your score does not sync with theirs, then you will face a resounding boo and be forced to retreat with your tail between your legs because clearly you do not understand how music works at all. But seriously, if you can read sheet music, this may be easy for you. If you cannot, then it's a matter of trial and error, which becomes more tedious the more score pieces that you have in your possession. Alternatively, there is also a trading quest that starts in Ritardando. If you are thorough in talking with all the NPCs in the world, you'll eventually be able to trade a basic item up for a really good piece of equipment. I'd recommend doing this if you get the chance. If you're familiar with Tri-Crescendo, you'll know that they have a reputation for a certain aesthetic when it comes to the way their games are presented. Many of the environments are always brimming with detail, with various light sources and animated objects bringing the world to life. As I was playing, I felt that the game was stylized in a similar way to Baton Kaitos, which made me feel really nostalgic for that game. The locations are all visually and thematically distinct, which made me feel joy with each new area I encountered. Whilst the environments are rich and vibrant, the characters themselves take on a more anime look, with big eyes and clean designs whose clothes sport many ruffles, lace and feathers. I feel like in the instance of Count Waltz, this didn't work too well as I didn't find him intimidating at all, and many of the monster designs also came across as cute rather than menacing. Aside from this, the appearance of the game certainly filled my heart with joy. As the entire game is based loosely on the life of Chopin, you will find a ton of musical motifs from the names of characters to locations. Motoi Sakuraba was a composer for the game, and whilst I didn't feel that many of the tracks were particularly memorable or catchy, they did fit the tone of the game. For segments outlining Chopin's life, his music is played by Russian pianist Stanislav Bunin, giving depth to what Chopin may have been feeling at the times of his life when he composed each individual piece. My favourite track is called The Boundary Between Snow and Ice, which plays in Celesta Forest. It reminds me a little of Baton Kaitos as well as Stardew Valley. It's just very calming and has an almost Christmassy feel to it. Makes me just want to get a cup of cocoa and curl up by the fire with a book and a cat nestled on my lap. Eternal Sonata is a journey to come to terms with the ending of life, but it also touches on political themes that are even rampant in today's society, such as the greed of government or a nation's desire for power. With a colourful cast of characters that all interact with each other, the adventure is an enjoyable one, even if sometimes the characters waffle on a little too much, though that can give you ample time to eat a snack. The innovative battle system will be sure to have you on your toes, strategizing on how to manage to keep your party alive, especially in the boss battles. If you haven't played this game, I would recommend that you pick it up when you get a chance. By the way, are there any games that you would like to see made based on a historical event? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venwa with a review of Eternal Sonata for the PS3. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to like and subscribe as it would help me out a bunch. As always, thanks for watching and I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Bye bye for now.